Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of, I have forgotten the date, August 28th. I will start with reading our land acknowledgement. The region of Niagara and the town of Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Wendourong, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Pardon me. Item 3 on our agenda is, as per our rules of procedure, the disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest at this time from our committee members? I see no hands, so we will take that as a no. And then moving on to our next item is the approval of the agenda. Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda? Councillor Korstanji. Councillor Vardy has seconded that. Any questions from the committee members at this time? Then it is resolved that the agenda for the August 28th, 2025 Finance Committee meeting be approved as presented. All those in favor by show of hands, please. And that is unanimous, so that is carried. Item number 5 on our agenda is receipt of previous minutes. So before we move into that, I first need a mover and seconder to receive the previous meeting minutes. Councillor Vardy has put up her hand. It's been seconded by Councillor Howe. Councillor Howe, go ahead.
If I can. If we could split the two of them, I've just got a couple of questions on 5.2, 5.1, no problem. If we could just split that out.
We certainly can. To the clerk, shall we start first with a motion to receive the previous meeting minutes of the Finance Committee, which is 5.1. So those are the minutes of July 24th, 2025. Councillor Vardy, are you okay if we amend the resolution that way? Thank you. So then the resolution as amended is to resolve that the Finance Committee minutes for the July 24th, 2025 meeting be received. All those in favor by show of hands? And that is unanimous. Thank you. That is carried. Councillor Howe, was there something on item 5.2 you wish to have pulled and speak to?
If I can, Chair. Going through it, I've got, and it is in respect to ED 25-2027 on page 3 of their minutes, and it refers to Business Ambassador Inauguration Dinner, September 25. Then I can remember getting an email that a meeting, I believe that it was on September 4th of GDAC, was canceled. It was going to be up at Camiso's, but then rescheduled the same day and brought back down to here. And then on, today is Thursday, so I think Tuesday afternoon, or was it Monday afternoon, got a letter talking about a Grimsby Economic Gala, as opposed to the ambassadors. I'm just I don't know what's happening. I usually, and I apologize, I did not make that previous GDAC meeting. I usually try to go to them, but unfortunately, I was probably enjoying the summer a little bit too much. But so I just I don't know if there's any thoughts. For me, it's been a little confused. Plus, and to top it, is the night, the September 25th, we've got a finance meeting here, and regional council has a meeting the same night. So I think the timing and what it is, I'm just not sure. So I don't know if maybe any information or.
Councillor Howe has been turning to our staff, so I guess we'll ask them first if there's any information about that particular dinner that they can share with us. And then Councillor Vardy has her hand up.
Thank you. It is
It was going to be the staff first.
Oh.
I was just going to say, no, I don't have any further information on that other than what's in the minutes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. It is the, on the 25th, and it's the onboarding event for the ambassadors for the economic development, and it is at Camiso's. I understand an agenda will be out shortly. There's a guest speaker, I know, coming from the Ontario Board of Commerce or Chair, yeah, is going to be there. So I think something will be out shortly. I imagine we'll probably have to amend the date of our finance committee, but that's the date we've got confirmed for it.
I guess if I can.
Councillor Howe, go ahead.
Mixing and confusing it a little bit is referring to it as a gala, and I'm going to go back 2 months ago, 3 months ago, somewhere in there, when there was conversation about there being a mayor's gala or a mayor's golf tournament. And the gala was put off, said, no, we're going to go with a golf tournament, because the gala was, the cultural gala was, a big deal, and still is a big deal, but now it's pushed back to November, whereas, would have been around September, October, something like that, a little bit earlier in the year. So I just, for clarity, I see it's for McNally, good source, but, is that the right source? I don't know. I just think that I would like to see this pulled out of these minutes, and I would like, if anybody's got anything else, wants to discuss it, but then I've got a bit of an idea, so. Okay. I'm going to suggest that we defer and refer. Defer that particular section to the next council meeting, September 8th, I believe it is, and refer it to staff for a report for that council meeting on September 8th. Just we can get, so I know, and everybody else knows exactly what's happening and how it came to be, I guess. So. Yep.
To shut your mic down, thank you. Councillor Vardy, would you like to reply?
I don't think that's a good idea, because planning is well underway. I know that economic development staff and the CAO have been very involved. I know this just from talking to the chair. If they want to give an update on the 8th, I think that's fine. But given that this is well in train, the management of this event has been going on for some time. This is confirmed there. I know that there are chefs lined up. It's also celebrating the opening of Camiso's new event area of his winery. So I think to postpone this part of the minutes would be causing a delay that would only cause problems for an event that's been well underway. It is a gala event in that it's a special event. It's a formal event, you know, possibly black tie. So I think the chair of the committee can provide more details on the 8th, but I think to defer this and refer it for a staff report is not being helpful at this time. As staff have all been very involved and as well, I think if the chair of the committee just gave a report on it on the 8th, I think that would cover off whatever concerns you have.
Any questions or comments from any other committee members about this? Then I will say that I'm not so sure from Councillor Howe's comments that the idea is to throw a wrench in the proceedings, simply to ask for some more information about the actual event. I too was a bit confused when I saw this going forward because there was a business ambassadors luncheon that was held as an inauguration, an onboarding event. So this seemed to me like a duplication to hold it again. Obviously, there are some other purposes for this event too, which are happening in all of this. So I'm confused about whether it's a public or private event. Which entity is recording the revenue and expenses from this? Is this a town event? Is this a private event? I'm not sure. I guess some more information would be nice to have. And as you said, the chair of GDAC could certainly come forward with that, or perhaps a staff member. The other thing that I will say I find disappointing, and our some of our chair and our staff member from the library are here. And I'll tell you what I find disappointing is that I know the library, the art gallery, and the museum are putting on their GLAM event, and every year as a council, we encourage them to do fundraising, and they do these events in order to bring in revenues to support their budget. And then we find another department holding an event and giving the proceeds outside of our process to a third party, when we know that it is entities like the library, the art gallery, and the museum that could really use some assistance in all of that. So I feel that although these are good charities, and the mayor's golf tournament also contributed towards the United Way and McNally and the Y and so on, but at the same time, I feel like we're forgetting that we have some departments in-house and some boards in-house that really could use an additional helping hand too. And what we did a long time ago at the start of this term of council is we instituted a process to basically encourage entities to apply for us and to grant them monies through that vetting process with follow-up that they're spending it in the right way. And then we hold these other events that name other charities in our town as recipients, which really are outside of our process, I guess. So I leave that just as a comment that to anyone on our staff or any of our departments when they're organizing these fundraising events to always remember that the town too is a charity and that we have some organizations that would really appreciate a helping hand, whether it's community services, the library, the art gallery, the museum, and so on. And so I will say, you know, that's the disappointing part, I guess, in some of the events that I've observed and who we're giving the net proceeds to. Nevertheless, I too have some questions in all of this. Now, the comment has been raised by Councillor Howe to refer it back for a staff report to come to September 8th. Do you have some specific questions that you would like to have answered before I ask if there's a seconder for that?
Just in general, how did we get here? How did it come to be? Something like this. I'm looking at the minutes from GDAC, the last minutes, and it just recommends the net proceeds from the Business Ambassador inauguration dinner, September 25th. It doesn't, there's no mention of a gala or black tie suggested, as in I've got the invite, on the 25th. Just conflict with dates. That certainly we've got a mayor that is on regional council, and we need to be careful on the amount of work we've got coming with the changes in the budget process. So as far as, in my mind, we defer this particular item to the 8th and ask staff to give us what's happening, exactly what's happening, and how we got there.
Are there any other questions that people would like to add to this? Anything Councillor Vardy, that you can share with us?
The only thing is, if you want to put forward a motion to have more information on the event, fine, but to defer this item, I would be against, because a lot of work has already been done. I know the business community has been very involved, and I know this just from talking to my colleague. So I think for more information, that's fine, but to defer it, I would be against it, because many businesses have already been quite involved through the Economic Development Committee. And so that's really all I've got to say. I wouldn't want to put a wrench in this, because it has been planned for quite some time. So I'll leave it at that.
Then any questions from staff? I'm just going to put our meeting on pause for one moment or two while the clerk and I consult as to the wording of the resolution, and then we'll come back. And maybe the easiest way to do this is, rather than me trying to read that, I'll let the clerk read the proposed resolution. If that meets the questions of Councillor Howe, who has put it forward, after it's read, then I'll ask for a seconder. We'll have one last opportunity for any questions or comments from any of the other committee members, and then we will vote on it.
Resolved that the Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes of August 7th, 2025 be approved, and that Resolution ED-25-27 from the Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes of August 7th, 2025 be referred to staff to report back at the September 8th council meeting addressing the decision for the net proceeds from the Business Ambassador Inauguration Dinner on September 25th, 2025 at Camiso Estate Winery to be donated to McNally House Hospice.
I'm not so sure that the essence of the questions had to do with McNally House per se. Just looking for more information was my understanding, Councillor Howe, just more information about the event itself. I do realize I was the one that raised the concern. But are there any, would you like it displayed up on the screen? Can we do that? Would that help everybody? Or is there anything you'd like to see amended if this were your resolution?
If something could, I guess what is jumping at me is the term gala and what it is, and the conflict that with something that's already been in place, and just, you know, the size of it. And then we've acknowledged the ambassadors, and I have no problem acknowledging the ambassadors again, but in respect to a gala, I just was really caught off guard on this one, right off guard. But even if that, we can get at least a conversation and get some information.
Member Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, I'm the deer in the headlights here. We are about to vote against something the Economic Development Committee. No, this is all under finance. And I feel like a deer in the headlights here because I don't want to take away that's something that's another committee's done, that committee members, if this is a council issue, it's your council problem.
And I think that's really where it's going. The intent is not to slow down the event by any means, but GDAC reports through finance to council, right? And so their minutes come to us, and there's a question been raised. Looking for more information is really the essence of it. And so what I am hearing is that there's a request for more information to come to council at the next meeting. Obviously not even to finance, because that would really slow it down. We're meeting on that exact date that they're planning the event. I don't think it's the intent at all to stop or slow it down. It's just to ask for more information at the council meeting itself.
Okay. So we're still approving the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to ask the clerk to read it again.
Resolved that the Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes of August 7th, 2025 be approved, and that staff report back at the September 8th council meeting providing further information regarding the Business Ambassador Inauguration Dinner to be held on September 25th, 2025 at Camiso Estate Winery.
And I think it's always important to ask our staff, is there anything else that you think we might be missing from the resolution, or any questions that you need us to outline for you to be able to answer this eventually?
No, I think that's fine, thanks.
And I think the other part to remember is that when we receive their minutes, we don't approve them, right? So if we could just make that slight amendment to the resolution. Would anyone like that resolution read one more time? Then we do need a seconder on the table, though. Is there a seconder for the resolution? Asking once, twice. It is just asking for information to come to council. It's not slowing it down in any way. We have a seconder. We still have to vote on it. All those in favor, by show of hands, please. The motion is carried. And I saw all hands up, so I will not be asking if any are opposed. And that concludes item 5, which is the approval of the minutes. We will now move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is delegations and presentations, and we have none tonight. Item 7 are consent reports. We have no consent reports on our agenda this evening. And that moves us to item 8 on our agenda, our discussion reports, and we will start with the first report, which is Finance 25-44, which is our work plan update. Could I get a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor? Councillor Kristangi has put her hand up. Member Thompson has seconded that. So any questions or comments from committee members? Maybe Mr. Delmonico, why don't I have you just walk us through that?
Thank you. Yes, this report provides a work plan update for the remainder of the year, as well as highlighting year-to-date accomplishments. You can see that in Appendix A for the work plan details. In that appendix, the completed items that have been completed have been marked with a check mark, and upcoming items are indicated with an X with the corresponding meeting date. Upcoming work plan items include things like the midterm budget variance report, long-term capital reserves and debt forecast, continued PKC updates. The audit plan will be coming in the fall, along with the setting of the interim tax rates for 2026. Advanced budget timelines have been approved by council this year, so the budget will be presented in early November. So we're planning to cancel the October Finance Committee meeting to accommodate the advanced budget timelines. Another high priority project that was recently presented to council relates to the water wastewater billing modernization project. And these are two key projects that will have staff devoting much of their time to them in the coming months, in addition to the items that are on the Finance Committee work plan. With the new strong mayor budget powers being in place, an amended Finance Committee terms of reference was recently approved by council, and that's been included as Appendix B to this report. As it relates to in-year budget amendments, those will continue to come before this committee unless we come across a rare situation where there is a tax levy impact involved, in which case that budget amendment would be under the purview of the strong mayor powers. If there's any comments or questions?
Member Scandinavo, go ahead.
Thank you. I just had a quick question on the work plan. There was I think it was this committee, if I'm not mistaken, requested the NPI GPI valuation. And it looks like it's slated for the September meeting with an X, but it also says council there. So does that mean that the draft report won't come back to this committee?
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. That's an in-camera report. Due to the confidential nature of the valuation, it would be going straight to council.
Is there no opportunity to have an in-camera session with this group, or? The reason why I ask is that, I think we asked for the report, So by asking for the report, it would be nice to, again, I guess this is not a binding group here, right? This is like a committee for, where we, give our recommendations. So I guess just to go full circle on it, it would be nice to see the outcome of the draft report. And is there an opportunity for us to have an in-camera session? I'm not sure how the bylaws work on that.
So there's a couple things there. One is that this committee doesn't meet in camera, and the other is that as per the shareholders' agreement with MPI, GPI, that information is confidential and cannot be presented outside council.
Sorry, this is not a question, just maybe you just want to make sure I understood correctly. So there's no possibility for this finance committee to meet in camera, and as a result, we're unable to see the results of the draft report because of the confidential or the confidentiality agreement, perhaps as a shareholder between us or between the town of Grimsby and I guess we own a portion of NPI, or yes. Did I capture that correctly? Sorry, I wasn't clear. Maybe I'll repeat it again. Sorry. There's no opportunity for us to have an in-camera session as a finance committee, and as such, we can't see the results of the report given the confidential nature of it.
Yes, the only thing is, even if there was an opportunity to meet in camera, it would still, under the shareholder agreement, be limited to council.
Any follow-up questions from committee members? Councillor Howe.
Understand members' questions. But I believe that any advisory group or standing committee, any members, lay members, I don't believe there's any confidentiality disclosure, where you have to sign that you're not going to disclose. I don't believe that that's even done, I don't think, with lay members, I don't think. Whereas we go through a bit of vetting with ourselves that, we've got to declare and then sign for it. But that's, as far as I know. Anyways, one other, if I can, just to flip the gears a little bit, on the mandate of the committee, they're changing. And I got to admit, the very first paragraph, the Finance Standing Committee will be receiving and approving reports regarding the town of Grimsby's financial matters if matters are within the scope of strong mayor powers legislation. Such matters are out of scope for the committee. And I read that, and all I could think about was a line from Forrest Gump. And he's saying there, life is like a box of chocolates. You put your hand in there and you never know what you're coming out with. And the strong mayor's powers is that same thing. We do not know what's coming from where or when it's coming. And it just seems to be such a large multi-headed creature. It just, this is everything. It could be anything. So what do, to your point, remember that, what do we don't know? Like, are we supposed to be here? I don't know.
Any questions or comments from other members? Member Thompson.
Geez, sorry about that. Yes, through you, Chair. So in this, on page 19 of 89, Director, should we even be, as a Finance Standing Committee, should we even be having NPI in there as advisory committee reporting to Finance Committee? If we don't even know what valuation is worth or moving forward, should we just even have it in there and just remove it? Just a question.
Councillor Vardy.
So I'll weigh in. Maybe there's a difference between knowing that they're auditing things on time, that they're being financially responsible in their day-to-day business. The other report is something separate, and it is, it would be confidential. So the reason being, let's say we wanted to sell it. We wouldn't want everyone in the world to know the valuation, right? So you'd have to keep that private. Same way that if we're looking at selling property in town, that would be an in-camera discussion. But, you know, we do discuss the finances of the operation. Are they managing things properly and all that? So I can kind of differentiate between that report and the kind of business that we would be concerned with, if that is helpful, or at least that's how I see it.
Member Scandinavo?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I think that makes sense, what you said there. But I guess on that note, I don't recall receiving any sort of financial information from NPI or GPI over the course of the past couple of years now. So other than requesting the valuation report, so totally respecting the confidentiality of the value, you know, given the comments made. But perhaps we should ask for a set of financial statements, or perhaps come to an agreement as to the frequency at which we can receive some sort of reports, as we do with the rest of the town's assets. But yeah, good point.
One last comment.
Maybe you can clarify for me, Councillor, when they have their AGM and they go over all this material, is that a public event for anyone who would like to go?
Mr. Delmonico, do you want to answer it, or shall I?
Yes, you can, correct me if I'm wrong, is that a public event?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yes, it is advertised as a council meeting. And because it's a council meeting, it is open to the public. Unfortunately, it's held during the day, it's held off-site, it's not held at our premises here, so unfortunately, the council meeting doesn't really get video conference like we are with the standing committees or council. But technically, it meets the criteria of being an open meeting, yes. I think the part that I struggle with too is, as some of our committee members have said, is that we've requested it. Certainly, disclosure of such information needs to be held in a private and confidential way for all the reasons that have been outlined. And having been down this road with the biodigester, I understand. The part I struggle with is that, yes, it is in our terms of reference. It is, and I have sat on those boards, and so I am privy to the details of the information in that unanimous shareholders agreement, and the wording is that it reports to council. When those agreements were drafted, though, there were standing committees. And I will say, it has been my observation that the reporting to council did not take place in the manner I would have expected it to take place. I'll just say it that way. So yes, I think it would be actually a really good thing, although their AGM is held once a year. Unfortunately, because it's off-site and during the day, you know, many people are not able to attend, and traditionally it's just council members and staff from GPI who have actually attended. I think it would be great if they would come to our finance committee and share with us an update of where they are, and related matters like that. I'll just ask any other committee member if they wish to comment before I grant you the floor, Councillor Vardy. Go ahead. I'll sorry. Go ahead. And then I'll recognize our other lay.
Okay, thank you. I went to the last meeting that was MPI, where it was open to the public, to see what was going on, because we were involved in this discussion. It's an asset that belongs to Grimsby, and say what it's performing like, what's the problems coming forth in that area. And I think the point is, if we're evaluating our assets, what is the value of the asset? You know, from all our deliberations we've had about what is the value of this, and all of a sudden we're being, well, okay, it's not your issue to worry about, your confidentiality, you're not going to find out. So then all of a sudden we're taken away from that discussion. And if that's the decision, that's the decision. But again, why go down that path on that point? So going to see this in an open session for public, it was interesting. There was a lot of good stuff in there. So perhaps this committee could have some involvement. But if you've got this confidentiality issue that you can't let us do that, then we can't do it. So to the point, take it off the menu, as it were.
I think the part that is always, that I've not been able to get my head around, I'll say, is to, and really I guess I need some feedback probably from our clerk or our town manager as to why lay members can't be asked to sign privacy and confidentiality agreements, and then why we wouldn't be able to meet in camera as a finance committee to discuss these things, or to have presentations from them, or to carry out any of what I would consider to be the due diligence of monitoring this investment. That's the part I've never truly been able to get my head around, as to, you know, what section of some piece of legislation actually forbids this from happening or doesn't envision it. I'm not sure what the essence of the answer is and why exactly it cannot take place. But so I leave that thought out there. But Councillor Vardy, you had your hand up too.
You mentioned that you were disappointed with what you have seen in terms of coming to council. Can I make the suggestion or motion, however, that we request them to come to a finance meeting, make a formal request to them, and state in that what it is we want them to report on, so that they're very clear in the information that we want. So we won't be disappointed if we don't get what it is that we want. And I think the other issue we can leave aside, and our chair can, you know, investigate that with the CAO. But maybe if we're very specific and we invite them to a specific meeting, tell them what we want to know, that I think maybe some of this disconnect can be fixed.
Certainly. Member Scandinavo, would that assist in your questions there?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think to Member Thompson's point, if we're going to have them on the list, then we should see some financial report that that we are evaluating, or we are reviewing and approving reports on the town of Grimsby's financial matters. So if it's on the list, we should do it. If it shouldn't be on the list anymore, well, then let's take it off the list. But I think, to your point, Councillor Vardy, I think it makes sense. Invite them, give them a list of what we expect to see, have them present, and then perhaps maybe it's on some frequency. It doesn't have to be every month. It could be on some sort of frequency where they come, they present, things, and we sort of move on. The only other point, so I think that's parking that issue. So I don't want to conflate the two issues here. So I'm going to park that issue. I think that was a great idea. I fully support that. The other issue is that I'm just kind of confused as to why we requested the valuation as a committee, or we're part of requesting the evaluation, but now we can't see it. So it's like, it's one or the other. So if we're unable to see it, great, but then we shouldn't have requested it to begin with. Because if it was confidential, then why did we request it, right? But nevertheless, I'm happy to hear where that lands.
I think because it is in our terms of reference and we were reviewing our external investments, that led to the question of how our internal investments were doing, which is the investment in Niagara Power and Grimsby Power. So I think we were going down the correct path under our terms of reference and under our financial obligations and responsibilities. Just now that it's gone that way, we appear to be hitting a roadblock as to how the reporting is now going to take place. Could we ask our Director of Finance to work with our clerk and our town manager and perhaps come back at the next meeting with an explanation for us as to why it needs to take the path and go straight to council rather than through a closed session, and just explain I'll say, the minutia of the details as to why lay members haven't been asked to sign privacy and confidentiality reports, and if that could be done, or if it's not possible at all, why it's not possible, those sorts of questions might alleviate at least the fork in the road as to how this is going to come back to us. That's the first part. I guess the second part was still the suggestion that we extended invitation to Grimsby Power primarily, I will say, or both, to come and as you said, to be very specific in our questions. So perhaps we could, I'll say, have a resolution extending an invitation to Grimsby Power and Niagara Power to attend, I'll say, the next finance meeting, which will be determined, and to come with an update on their operations. Would you like anything more specific than that, or just a general update on their operations? Yes, Member Scandinavo.
I think some sort of like, for lack of better terms, financial variance reporting, right? Maybe where they stand in comparison to their budget year to date at that point in time. Give us something, right? And then at that point in time, we can see what they have, refine it, and get something back. Also, like, you know, financial reports aren't often strictly numbers. There's usually some flavor to it as to, hey, here's are some of the challenges we face, or here's some of our financial risks, so we can help them. I think the whole point of this is to help guide in some decision-making, right? So I would recommend some sort of, you know, year-to-date financial report, you know, as where they stand in comparison to their budget, with some highlights, you know, some highlights as to what's going well, what's not going well, and maybe where we can help.
Now, GPI and NPI do have their own boards of directors, and I assume those types of reports are being presented to them on a regular basis. So I don't think we're asking for something that is new and unique to the reporting process. It should just be, yes, we gave that to the board the last time. Why don't we, you know, might have to be slightly tweaked in order to come to finance, but I don't think it's that hard for them to actually report in that way. Is there anything that any other members would like to see coming forth at that time? Then just ask the clerk, we should have a resolution to this effect. So let's pause for one moment while we review the drafting of the resolution. I'm going to have the clerk read the resolution first.
Resolve that the Finance Committee recommend council to direct staff to request that a representative from Grimsby Power Incorporated attend a future Finance Committee meeting to provide a financial year-to-date and operational update on Grimsby Power Incorporated.
To our committee members, does that fit with your thinking? Could we have someone move that resolution then, please? Member Thompson has so moved. A seconder? Member Scandinavo. By a show of hands, all those in favor, please. And that is carried. Thank you. The second part, though, will go back to the first question on attempting to understand why the fork in the road has to be there, I'll call it, to go, we understand the privacy and confidentiality concerns for sure. Just, we'll pause for one more moment while the clerk drafts a resolution on that. Have the clerk read the next resolution.
Resolved that the Finance Committee recommend council to direct staff to report back to the Finance Committee at a future Finance Committee meeting on the reasons why the Finance Committee may or may not receive the Grimsby Power Incorporated valuation in closed session.
Committee members, does that make sense, the drafting of the resolution? Then I need, yes, go ahead.
I was just looking under Schedule 2, the Finance Standing Committee. That's part of this first issue we're looking at. And it outlines exactly what the Financial Standing Committee does and who's involved in it and what they look at. And it's pretty clear to me that it's all in there, including, anything to do with the Grimsby Power, Niagara Power. It's all there. And if it's not there, or there's nothing in there about having restrictions. So that's just a recent schedule updated, so maybe that should be clarified.
Well, I think once we understand the reasons why this committee may or may not be able to look at those things, that may also help clarify the next steps after that. But Mr. Delmonico.
Yeah, it's not that NPI, GPI doesn't report to this committee, as it mentioned in the terms of reference, it does. I guess it's just some things are confidential for reasons that, for the shareholder agreement, cannot be shared with committee. It has to be with council. That's really the reason. If you're asking for the reason, right? A, we don't go on camera. B, even if we do go on camera, it has to be straight to council. And that's really the reason.
So the resolution is on the floor. Do we have a mover for that resolution? Member Demare, a seconder, Councillor Howe, I see your hand down there. By a show of hands, all those in favor of the resolution, please. And thank you. That was everyone's hand accounted for, so that motion is passed. Thank you. Yes, and now we will go back to the original motion that was on the floor. So the actual resolution is resolved that report Finance 25-44, 2025 Finance Committee Work Plan Update dated August 28th, 2025 be received for information. All those in favor, please, by show of hands. And that is carried. Thank you. The next item up on our agenda is Item 8.2, which is the Peach King Center expansion cost update. If I could have a mover and seconder to get it on the floor, please. Councillor Vardy and Councillor Howe has his hand up. So I will ask Mr. Delmonico to take it from here.
Thank you. So we're still on budget and on track for year-end completion of this major project. One item of note that I'd like to bring to the attention of the committee, which is referenced on page 2 of the memo, relates to correspondence that we received from our tax consultant. Their opinion confirms what we had suspected, that the HST rebatable status of the project should be 100%, which will enable us to recover an additional $635,000 in HST expenses. So just as some background, municipal organizations are typically eligible to recover 86.46% of HST costs. That effectively reduces the municipal HST from 13% to 1.76%. However, there are cases that are eligible for what's called an input tax credit, or an ITC, that allows for 100% of the HST to be rebated. And so that's in cases where the municipality is incurring capital expenditures, where the intended use of the property is primarily for commercial activities. So common examples of this would be for recreation centers like the PKC. Now, the figures in the report still reference the partial rebate. The staff project team will be providing a more detailed update on the impact of this as part of next month's report. So look for more details then. I just want to close off by saying that some staff were offered a walkthrough of the facility earlier this week, and things are looking great. It's really starting to take shape. Partial access to the facility will begin later in September to accommodate the hockey season. Thank you.
Any questions at this time from committee members? Councillor Vardy.
Not a question, but a suggestion. I think this is really good news and one we should raise at council. So perhaps as the finance chair, you might want to do that.
Any other comments or questions on this report? Everything else seems to be on schedule, on time, on budget, so that is all good news too. And although I do mean this with a bit of humor, I will also say on behalf of all of us that we are truly hoping that the $635,000 is a windfall, and that doesn't mean that there's more money that will be spent on the project. And I do say that with some humor. So at this point in time, resolve that report, Finance 25-45 on the Peach King Center expansion cost update, August of 2025, dated August 28th, 2025, be received for information. All those in favor, please, by show of hand. And that is carried. The third report this evening is Finance Report 25-46, our biannual procurement report. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Cristangi and Member Thompson have moved and seconded that. Mr. Delmonico, I turn it over to you then.
Thank you. This report is also here for information. It covers procurements from this past January to the end of June. Total procured in the period was $4.7 million. Most of that activity was via the informal quote process in the $15,000 to $75,000 range. Most of the procurement dollars were related to 7 open competitions in the $150,000 plus level, with one non-competitive award at that level for the meter replacement project, which is currently underway. The report provides a summary of dollar amounts and quantities of procurements that fall under each category. And if there's any questions or comments, be happy to take them.
Committee members, any questions? Councillor Vardy.
Sorry, just a quick one. Roughly, what % of our procurement is local versus external to, say, Grimsby or Niagara? Ballpark it, I'm not.
And it depends what you mean by local. Like if you're talking Canadian, I would say high 90%. It's harder to tell what's Grimsby and Niagara region. We don't always know where the vendors are based out of. That's a little harder to tell. I won't want to hazard a guess.
Well, that's, I think, very good. I mean, some things I know we can't buy in Canada, like fire trucks, so no, but I think that's very good. But it'd be interesting to know if we try to keep supporting Grimsby business.
And certainly when we looked at the procurement rules in the last, I'll say, 8 months, this committee put forth a suggestion to council specifically that we always sort of look within Canada first. So, perhaps it would be appropriate to ask staff at some point in time just to report back and say, how is that working? How are you able to actually, walk through that, that forest, I guess, to make sure? What is the process and how is that working out for us that way?
Yeah, I think it's been working well. There haven't been any cases where, even when we put it out for open competition, it's primarily Canadian vendors that we're dealing with, right? So we haven't really experienced any issues with that. It's more just the cases where, like Councillor Vardy was saying, where we can't source it anywhere but the U.S.
And fortunately, we have no fire trucks. We're about to have to order very soon. But I think the other topic that came up in the past was computer software. Some computer software just is not made and created in Canada. And so inevitably, we end up buying it, and usually from the United States. Would that be true, Mr. Delmonico?
Yes, that's correct.
If there are no other questions on the biannual procurement report, then resolve that Report Finance 25-46 on the biannual procurement report dated August 28th, 2025 be received for information. By show of hands, all those in favor, please. Any opposed? That is carried. The fourth item this evening is on Finance 25-47, the library budget realignment. If I could have a mover and seconder to get the report on the floor, please. Councillor Kristangi and Member Scandinavo. Mr. Delmonico.
Thank you. Some budget amendments are being proposed between the library and art gallery to simplify financial processes, realign accountabilities, and improve asset management practices. The library and art gallery share a physical building on Carnegie Lane. The library budget is approved by the library board and then forwarded on to council for approval, while the art gallery budget is approved as part of the community services department budget. And the budget and actual expenses for the maintenance of this facility are currently split, approximately 2/3, 1/3 for the library and the art gallery. All maintenance activities, however, are managed and overseen by community services. So currently the maintenance budget is broken out and included in both the library and art gallery budgets, with actual invoice costs split and assigned to the library and art gallery as well. This adds additional steps and unnecessary complexity to budgeting, forecasting, and invoice processing. So we're recommending to move the library maintenance budget to the art gallery budget. This would allow all of the facilities maintenance costs to be budgeted and managed in one cost center by the community services team. The library budget would now include a one-line allocation in recognition of their 2/3 share of the maintenance budget. With respect to reserves, currently the library budget includes a $45,900 transfer from operating to the library facilities reserve. The library also has an equipment reserve, which currently has no dedicated funding. And the art gallery budget does not include any transfers to the facility reserve at the moment. So we're proposing to realign that $45,900 into a $12,900 transfer to the library equipment reserve, with the remaining $33,000 being moved to the art gallery budget. And just as with maintenance, 2/3 of that, $22,000, would form part of the library facilities allocation. Now, to better reflect the reserve purpose, we're proposing to rename the library facilities reserve to the library art gallery facility reserve. The purpose of this reserve is to fund building rehab and renewal, things like roof replacements, window replacements, landscaping, etc., all of which is overseen by the Community Services Department. But use of the reserve, as with all reserves, is ultimately governed by council. We're also recommending that the library equipment reserve be renamed the library furniture and equipment reserve, with the purpose of this reserve being to fund replacement of library technology and equipment needs, including shelving and furniture. Use of the reserve would be as determined by the library board with final approval granted by council. So if I can try to simplify it, you can think of it like this. The facility reserve would be used to fund renewal of items common to all types of buildings, whereas the library furniture and equipment reserve will be used to fund items that are common to libraries. Now, staff have met with the chief librarian and art gallery manager to review these changes, and it's important to note that the community services team intends to continue to fully collaborate on an ongoing basis with the library team to ensure that their maintenance needs are being heard and met. If there's any questions?
Any questions from committee members? So if I understand it correctly, what we're trying to do is align the operational responsibility with where we budget for this. Would that be a good description of that?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the way it is right now, like the maintenance aspects are included in the library budget. So technically it's under their control. But then when it comes time to spend the money, it's under community services control, right? So a bit of a disconnect.
Simply because they rely on the expertise in the community services team in order to do that. So I'm guessing if there's a water leak, they call someone in community services who then has that responsibility to look into it and take it on. Okay. And then I guess my concern, if I put my library hat on, is the amount that they have budgeted in the past for repair and maintenance. I'm assuming it's just now going to be on a different line. It's going to be in cost allocation, which in the world of cost accounting and accountants is something we do frequently. But it will be a comparable number to what has always been there before, unless everybody knows of some reason going into the budget why they're expecting maintenance expenses to be, or repair and maintenance to be considerably higher. But assuming all things being the same, that cost allocation account would be a number very comparable to what the repair and maintenance has been before. Because they still have to submit requests for grants and things like that. So they need to show that there is a cost related to all of this too, that hasn't changed. So I guess the big change in all of this really has to do with the reserves as to what reserve gets recorded on in whose department and how much that transfer is. Can you just go through that again one more time with us?
Yeah, so right now, the library facilities reserve gets an annual allocation of $45,900 from the operating budget that goes into that reserve annually. And again, that reserve serves the building that's combined with the library and art gallery. So there's nothing in the art gallery budget. So when it's time to do something like the roof, if you recall a few months ago, we had to take that from a separate park recreation reserve. Right? So by separating it out like this, that 33,000, right? We're taking 12,900, allocating it to the equipment reserve because right now it's got no contribution to reserve. It needs a funding source. So what's left is that 33,000, and then that, just like the maintenance costs, are going to be split 2/3 library, 2/3 art gallery. So the whole 33,000 transfer will be budgeted in the art gallery budget, but then that 22,000 that represents the library share will be part of their maintenance and reserve allocation.
So nothing is changing in terms of our expenses or our transfers to reserve, and there is no impact on our residents in terms of our property taxes. It's more a question of which department these things will be budgeted and recorded in, and then as appropriate reallocated out to the appropriate department, art gallery or library, sorry to call the library department, through the board. And will you be doing this like semi-annually, annually? What's the idea on how often you would be doing this? Because I'm thinking the library and the art gallery are probably used to seeing internal financial statements and knowing what's in their accounts almost every month or however often they review it. So what's your thinking behind the scenes as to how often you'll do this interdepartmental allocation?
So we want to keep it simple. We don't want to make it more complicated. So the allocation could just be done on a monthly basis based on the budget amount, and then revised and adjusted through each year's budget process.
So almost thinking like a true-up calculation at the end of the year that, if they budget, let's say, $20,000 every month, you'll record an interdepartmental allocation monthly, but then the actual costs will still be in the art gallery. So will there be some sort of true-up at the end of the year where you move it to the actual amount?
So the thinking would be that the variance would be shown in the art gallery budget, and then if there's a need to adjust to the budget because it's something that's going to persist, then we would adjust the allocation going forward.
Member Scandinavo, I saw you sort of putting your hand up there. Go ahead.
I had a very basic question, or at least I hope it's basic. So the art gallery is a department of the town of Grimsby, and the library is a separate entity that reports in. But the library's reserves on the town of Grimsby's balance sheet. It's not on its own balance sheet.
It's on its own and then consolidated with the town.
So on this list of reserves here, let's later on in the agenda, the library reserve is technically not on the town of Grimsby's like individual set of financial statements. It's on its consolidated set.
Correct, yeah, it's still reflected on the consolidated statements.
And of course, to be clear, it is still finance that does the accounting for the library as well. So, so the reserve is in our accounting records no matter what, and ultimately rolls up into the consolidated, yes. Councillor Howe, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Just for some people's information, and I'd like to recognize two very important people from our library. Deidre Burke, Chair of our Grimsby Public Library Board, and Ashley Whip, our Director, CEO, Chief Librarian, and boss. Anyways, those two ladies, and thank you very much for being here tonight.
Are there any other questions from committee members on this report? Then not seeing any, the resolution is resolved that report finance 25-47, the Grimsby Public Library Art Gallery Building Budget Alignment dated August 28, 2025 be received, and that one, the Finance Committee recommends that Council approve the budget realignment for the Grimsby Public Library Art Gallery building, and two, that the Finance Committee recommends that Council approve the Reserve and Reserve Fund policy updates as outlined in the report. All those in favor by a show of hands, please. And that is carried. The next report is Finance Report 25-48, the Reserve Policy Update with funding targets. If I could have a mover and seconder to get the report on the floor. Councillor Howe and Member Scandinavo. Mr. Delmonico, go ahead.
Thank you. This report is a follow-up to the Reserve Funding Targets Report that was brought to the committee back in May. This report's been updated to include the findings of the most recent iteration of the town's asset management plan, which included recommended levels of service. Appendix A of the report contains updated asset values, recommended reinvestment rates to support asset renewal needs over the next 10 years, as outlined in the asset management plan, and what that translates to in terms of target reinvestment dollars for each of our reserves. Appendix A also shows what our current annual funding contributions are, as well as dedicated senior government funding that we receive in the form of recurring capital grants. As shown in Appendix A, we have a tax-supported funding gap of $4.3 million per year. The report also includes scenarios to potentially bridge the gap. Looking at the table on page 4 of the report, you can see that annual increases in reserve contributions equal to 3% of the tax levy would close the gap by 2036. Smaller asset management levy increases of 2% per year would close the gap by 2050. At 1% or less, the gap would continue to grow because of inflation. So that brings me to some key assumptions made, is that assumptions made in this scenario is that as debt payments for Fire Station 2 and the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital expire, we would continue to budget for those payments as a boost to our reserve contributions. Another key assumption relates to inflation. We've assumed 3% annual increase in the value of our assets. If construction inflation is actually higher than that, which it has been recently, it would then take longer to close the gap. Now, the table on page 5 shows the impact that enhanced senior government funding can have on our ability to close the gap. Matching government funding would help close the gap much more quickly. Now, I do want to mention that table 5, or sorry, I keep calling it table 5, the table on page 5 of the report, and the graphs in Appendix B, that shows the impact. They've been revised from when the agenda first went out because some of the matching dollars were being double counted. But, you know, the moral of the story is the same. The enhanced senior government funding is required to achieve meaningful gains without overburdening Grimsby taxpayers. And I do want to say that, you know, studies have shown that of the 3 levels of government, municipalities bear the burden when it comes to the cost of infrastructure renewal. Yet we have the most limited funding sources available to tackle these gaps. Financial support to recognize efforts made by municipalities would go a long way to encouraging us to contribute more and make concrete gains to long-term financial sustainability. One last important note, the reserve and reserve fund policy has been updated and it's shown as Appendix C. And basically the update is that it includes that schedule that's attached to it now that shows the asset values and target reinvestment rates for each of our reserves. I just want to mention that you know, those reinvestment rates are kind of they're a goal. It's not something that we're going to, you know, jump into right away, obviously. So just please keep that in mind.
Questions? Comments? Member Scandinavo.
Thank you very much for this report. Really well written, very clear. I had a question. So, you know, if you look at your charts there, they show like the divergence, or the what happens should we not increase the levy or recommend increasing the levy. But I'd imagine that's based on expected expenses on. Sorry, I'm at a loss for words here, but expected expenses based on some of these, you know, Canadian infrastructure report cards and, you know, what we expect to spend on some of these assets. What I don't see, and maybe it's not possible, is like a snapshot of where we are today. Like, given the state of our infrastructure and its age and the value of our reserve, are we that underfunded or at risk of underfunding? You know, for example, if we expect to, I'm sorry, this is a long question, but if we expect to spend 2% on our fleet of vehicles every year, are we actually spending 2%? Are we spending more? Are we spending less? Are we actually at that much of a risk by not contributing 2% back into that reserve? Are we spending what we think we should be spending? You know, are we going to inflate these reserves to something that is unneeded? I shouldn't say not needed, but at what speed do we try to get to close that gap based on our current expenditures? I'm sorry for the lengthy question.
No, thanks for the question. Yeah, no, I mean, spending's going to fluctuate from year to year, and I would say that, you know, in the short term, it's not a risk, but the risk then becomes longer term. When you're not saving what you need to in the reserves, you're going to have less and less ability to renew those assets as the time comes in the future. You're going to have to then rely more on debt to rehabilitate your reserves. And the more debt you take on, and the more interest you're going to be paying on that debt. Rather than paying interest on the debt, it might be more prudent to start contributing onto reserves as as we can. So these rates over the next 10 years, they're based on the levels of service that were recommended from the asset management planning report. So, it's recommending that you would, reconstruct a road when it reaches a certain level of criticality. Same thing with facilities. When they reach a certain, facility condition index, it's time to do certain activities. So, and because of the capital nature of it, you're not going to be spending that amount every year. You're probably going to spend it in big chunks as the need arises. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Any other questions? Follow-up question, and then Member Demare.
Yeah, quick follow-up question. So would be helpful to understand with these, in Appendix B, with these suggested rates, what does a 3% increase of the levy look like in terms of total dollars to the budget and cost to average Grimsby household?
Sure, just give me 1 second. So 1% would be about 190,000. 2% would be double that, which would be 380,000, and then 3% would be about 570,000.
And to the average household, like plus or minus? If you don't have it in front of you, we don't have to discuss it today. Just for a future meeting.
Member Demare.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to look at, when I looked at the 2025 asset management plan, each department in the Grimsby municipality put together their version of what their asset quality and how long they are going to last, and what's emergency and what's not so problematic. The question, I guess, in that process, if they're looking at, well, a lot of the assets are in good shape, so they won't need to be replaced for a while. So that extends out the time period, but also inflation continues to build over that time period. So then, do they take into account the cost of that replacement, say 10 years down the road, when it is now time to replace it? And now what you're looking at in today's dollars is all of a sudden, a lot more money. Is that, or is there a component for that, inflationary increases? I just couldn't see it in this as, looking at when you do your analysis, okay, how much I need to have to replace, assets A, B, and C based on the timelines. The longer you get out, the more inflationary costs are, and if that's not part of the issue, then we're getting a gap there that's not being dealt with. So was this addressed, or I'm not seeing it? I don't know. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the asset management report was based on a snapshot in time, so that's the current values and amounts that are needed on an annual basis. The amounts in the report that's before you, in terms of how much would be needed every year to close the gap, that does include a 3% annual inflation factor.
Okay, that's good. 3% each year, so that will covers off, the average annual inflation, so that, we're not going to be caught by this situation, tariffs, whatever else. It's sort of inflationary issues, so that these figures you've got are based on that, so that you've got a question here, like a bump ups are required at a low amount, but at a, you're pushing us out. So is there an emergency now to boost that up?
No, I'd say no, there's not an emergency now to boost it up, but it's just something we need to be mindful of. We don't want to be down the road, whenever that might be, years down the road, in an emergency situation. So we're just trying to, bring this to the attention of the committee, just so we're mindful of that and be as prudent as we can for long-term financial sustainability.
And I guess to summarize it is always a wiser financial decision to save for the future than it is to ignore it and then go out and take on more debt at the time. And of course, municipalities are limited as to how much debt they can take on. And in addition to that, this committee has also looked at the amount of debt financing that staff and this committee think is a reasonable number, and have tried to also keep that to be a fairly conservative and lower number as well. So in so doing, that means that it is always prudent to try and save for that down the road, rather than to rely on debt to get us out of that situation when the time comes. I guess it's like, you know your roof is going to need to be replaced and you totally ignore it, and then you go take out a big loan at the time, or you keep saving a little bit every year so when the roof needs to be replaced, you have the money in hand. At the end of the day, that roof will cost you less if you don't have to borrow in order to redo the roof, right? The other question I wanted to ask about this report has to do with one of the charts where we look at matching by our other levels of government. And so I guess my question really is, what is the probability that we think that might actually happen?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure. Right now, if you look at the Appendix A chart, for the levy-supported assets, it's basically our matching our funding. We're contributing about 2.3 million. They're contributing 2.5. It is about matching now. If that could continue, that would be great. It's just that as we need to put away more and more, it might be more pressure for the senior levels of government as well as us to keep that up. But if they could continue that, I think that would go a long way to really making some concrete gains to closing the gap. These asset management plans were a requirement of the province. What they ultimately do with them is up to them, but hopefully they will reward municipalities that start to help themselves, and maybe that's a good way to encourage other municipalities to do the same.
Thank you. That is a good point that we have talked about before, that I know in looking at some of our neighboring municipalities, we have what I will say, a nice amount in reserves and haven't had to resort to debt financing for what I'll call like everyday capital projects, right? We usually, we go to rebuild roads, water and sewers, and so on, and traditionally have not borrowed for those. We've borrowed for things like, the fire station in the past, or for the Peach King Center, for buildings that have a very long life. And I realize roads and water and sewer mains have very long lives too, but traditionally, we've limited taking on debt to what I'll call kind of unusual items or one-offs, not the things we do every single year that are part of our responsibility. So I totally agree with you. I hope that, our province and our federal government would look at which municipalities are being responsible about this, which ones have gone back to their residents and said, you need to contribute as well, and would be cognizant of that and not reward those perhaps who have not done that. And because that would seem totally unfair to not support those who have tried so hard, and then to support those who have not, right? I'm not so sure how we can get that message across to them, other than if any of you know our local MPPs and MPs, I encourage everybody to spread that message that, those who are careful about managing their finances and who are seeking to save and build up the reserves to be able to meet those purchases in the future do deserve some encouragement. We'll call that money too. Any other comments or questions by committee members? Member DeMare.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yes, you're right very much about the last point you made, but politics is politics. So it's like you don't know what's in the box, like to the question about Forrest Gump. We have to play that. Hopefully, we will be in a better shape because we're doing the job properly, and we have done for a number of years to do that. So the question is, will this carry on? Also growth, in the sense that Grimsby's got growth plans. I assume that the plan also includes a certain amount of growth expected in the community, and therefore you'll have additional requirements in the community for infrastructure. And that's new infrastructure. It's not budgeted for. But is this part of the budget a certain percentage for growth? And how is that growth determined?
So the report just looks at the rehab and renewal of our existing assets. So and certainly as the town grows, it will, would initially fund the growth through development charges. And then as the assets come on board, we would have to add them to our asset inventory and adjust to these rates as we move forward. The rates won't be static, just like inflation won't be static. So we will be updating these asset management reports every 5 years, at least, and that'll be providing us with good data to update our numbers as well.
If there are no further questions or comments, then the resolution on the floor is resolved that Report Finance 25-48 on the asset management summaries and reserve funding targets dated August 28th, 2025 be received, and that the Finance Committee recommends Council approve the updated reserve fund policy attached as Appendix C. All those in favor, by show of hands, please. And that is carried. The next report up, our sixth discussion report, is Finance 25-49 on the Fire Marquee Agency Agreement. If I could have a mover and seconder to get the report on the floor at this time. Councillor Vardy has moved. A seconder, please. Member Thompson. Mr. Delmonico, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. So this report is here. Once again, the committee deferred this item from last month. So to refresh your memory, we are proposing to enter into a 3-year agreement with Firemark. The agreement can be canceled anytime with 30 days notice. We're estimating that recovery amounts would be in the range of $20,000 to $40,000 per year. But that, of course, would depend on the level of applicable fire incidents. There is no upfront cost to use this service. Firemark works on a contingency basis. They would keep 30% of the recoveries made. If no recovery is made, then there's no charge, even though they may have spent time working on the file. We're recommending Firemark because they have specialized expertise in this area. They understand the policy language and billing processes. Trying to do this in-house with staff that deal with such issues on an ad hoc basis would increase administrative risk, leading to potential lost revenues. Using Firemark would require a low commitment from staff, typically only requiring them to submit basic incident data. Utilizing the service would allow us to tap into a new revenue source without collecting from property owners directly. Recoveries would come from insurance companies, and in cases where the coverage is not provided by the insurance company, no recovery would be made and the homeowner would not be responsible for any costs. Lincoln has been using Firemark for the past several years. From their experience, they've had 16 claims filed, but only 3 have led to recoveries. And so that's a good example of how doing this in-house could divert a lot of staff time away from other duties pursuing claims that may not materialize. As for the insurance implications, insurance premiums are based on pooled risk. The broader market forces and claim costs are the primary drivers of insurance premiums. Again, some insurance companies carry this coverage, some don't. If we opt not to pursue these revenues, I don't suspect premiums would be lowered by insurance companies. And similarly, if we do opt to pursue these revenues, I don't think that by doing so that we would be moving the needle. If there's any questions or comments. I just want to mention we have Chris Carrier from Firemark here that could help answer questions as well.
And we also have Fire Chief Hudson here, who is familiar with the town of Lincoln's operations too, if anyone has any questions for him too. Member Scandinavo, your hand was up.
Yeah, thanks for the report. I had some questions that you'd previously answered, but just for the sake of the committee. I think I had some concern about a couple different items that, let's say someone has a fire in their yard, they're doing a controlled burn, and the fire gets out of hand, and, the fire department gets dispatched. And the homeowner perhaps wanted to self-insure the risk, saying, my house didn't burn. It was just some brush in the backyard that burned out of control. But there was an incident that gave the potential for Fire Marquee to file a claim on behalf of the town of Grimsby. My concern was an insurance claim would have been filed on behalf of the town to the homeowner's insurance company in an instance where perhaps there wouldn't have been a claim at all, right? So, perhaps losing claim-free discounts or increasing their premiums because there was increased risk. So I was assured that if a homeowner wasn't putting in a claim, that Fire Marquee wouldn't put in a claim on behalf of the town of Grimsby, thus eliminating that risk. And additionally, I think I do agree with your comment that if most municipalities across the province are using the service, by us using it, only in the instances when the claim already exists is not going to move the needle, or is very unlikely to move the needle. And last but not least, if a homeowner's insurance doesn't have this coverage for whatever reason, no claim would be filed. So I think it's a revenue source that other municipalities are taking advantage of, and there's no negative implication to the homeowner. So I think it's my fear of having a negative implication to a homeowner in their policy or a property owner in their policy has been alleviated. So my concerns have been dealt with. So thank you for that, and hopefully that helps.
Any other questions or comments from committee members? I see Councillor Howe's hand up first, and then Member Demare.
And through you, Chair. In this report, we've got a list of consolidated fees and charges, but I don't ever recall seeing this. Is it just freshly done, or have we had these on the books? Because as long as I've been around, I don't remember ever seeing it, but.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, those schedules were just provided as a frame of reference to show what fees we currently charge as it relates to fire. This is taken from the user fee bylaw, which relates to fire among other user fees. So it's just provided as a reference.
Member Demare.
Thank you, Chair. Some questions here, like the MTO recoveries, 17,000. So $500 a call, roughly, that's 35 calls. And that's the fire department, I assume, putting in the, dealing with the fees on that recovery. Secondly is the number of fire calls that result in fire charges to the insurance company, where there's actually a fire, where a policy will respond. So it has to be a fire in the house or the building that's caused some significant damage to the insurance company that will then pay the fire charges. And I think the fire charges would be around $500 to $1,000 per incident. I don't know how many incidents. I think Lincoln said they didn't have a lot. So the question is, we're getting $17,000 from MTO. So those are out in Queensway, the QEW, excuse me, and it's roughly 35 calls. I don't know how many calls would result in the fire department, charging somebody for a fire or call under their policy. I don't think Lincoln had a lot. So those are the questions I asked, because I don't know if it's a lot of revenue, and I don't know who's doing the work for MTO right now, recoveries. Is it the fire department? Is it staff? I mean, the issue about staffing, I appreciate dealing with insurance companies, but if we're already dealing with MTO, that is probably something similar.
Thank you. Yeah, so the fire department deals with the MTO recoveries. They submit claims to the MTO, and then the MTO process it from there and, provides us with our share if they deem it's appropriate. That's separate. Just want to be clear, that's separate from Firemark. Firemark wouldn't be dealing with MTO recoveries. We would continue to do that. Firemark would only deal with property-related claims. In terms of the number, Lisa, did we have an estimate on the number of what we were thinking could be relevant?
Our fire staff estimated there were 61 incidents within the last 3 years that might be investigatable.
Just want to add investigatable, like, similar to that Lincoln example, doesn't mean you get money back in every case.
Okay, 61 calls. The question is how many resulted in a claim that requires the insurance company to pay for the damage or for the call? Because the damage was significant, so that the call was, rather than just a call coming at someone's, fire alarm went off. I don't know. So I don't know how many times. But interesting, you're saying that the MTO, the fire department sends the information to MTO and gets reimbursed based on, I don't know the process, but there's already fire department people doing that. So the question is, if we don't have a lot of situations where a fire is going to result in a charge to the insurance company because there's not enough serious fires to do that, maybe that's something that a small amount of work that the fire department could handle. I'm just saying that I understand that you don't want people to be trained in this when there's not a lot of work and it's easier to give it to Firemark, but I'm just saying we're already doing some of it already with the fire department. So can this be dealt with that way as an alternative? I'm saying that.
Yeah, I think the issue we'll come across there is if the incidents are so few and far between that they're not going to be in, what's the word, like almost in training. Firemark deals with this. That's the only thing that they deal with. They know exactly what to do to get the most recovery. Our staff would be dealing with this on an ad hoc basis, may miss certain important details, and we end up recovering less. The flip side, if we have so many, staff may be overwhelmed, and then by the same time, they may not have the capacity to deal with so many incidents to follow up with. And I guess the last part of it is that because not everything results in a recovery, you could be spending time on something that ends up leading to a dead end.
If I could ask the fire chief, do you have any comments you'd like to add to this or information to share with the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to mention, as you mentioned, that I'm familiar with the Lincoln experience. Lincoln has been involved in Firemark since 2016, so it's coming on about almost 10 years now. That said, Lincoln did have a little bit of a slow start, although we signed up for the service. We did have some staffing issues that precluded us from actually collecting for the first couple of years. So it wasn't until a couple of years into it that we had our game together, we were able to start collecting. I'm supportive of it in that it does allow us a revenue source to recover some of the hard costs we do incur at fire calls we do go to without burdening the general taxpayers through the levy. In terms of the ability of staff to do it, and I know the files that have been provided for Lincoln, there is a breakdown of what the Firemark staff went through to collect the claims, or if they didn't collect the claims, and it is quite extensive. You're dealing with different fire insurance companies. You have to know the ins and outs of the industry. There's a lot of work involved from what I can see. Completely different from the MTO process, where there's been a process in place with the province of Ontario. It's very strict, cut and dry process. We just submit an online form to say, these trucks went on the QEW at this time. Here's what we did, and even that, we only get about 50% of the claims approved through the MTO. The Lincoln experience is, it does vary widely from year to year. It just depends on the calls we do have. And I think the claims have ranged from about $900 some odd for a particular claim. And I think our highest was over $50,000 for a single claim. So it does vary very widely. But our experience in Lincoln has been very positive. And, in terms of staff burden, it has been relatively minimal. So.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions by any committee members, comments? Member Demare, go ahead.
It's questions because I'm my insurance background. So, yes, I could see that MTO is cut and dry, stand back and forth. Dealing with insurance companies, yes, they all have different adjusters. And yes, Firemark has got the setup with the different insurance companies. So it would be easier for them to deal with it. And of course, insurance companies then would know Firemark and they go back and forth. So it is. And the question is, how much revenue? Because a fire expense charges depending on the damage of the fire, right? And how many hours was the fire department there? And I don't know how many times Grimsby Fire Department would be involved in a major fire, but I would think it would probably be a couple hours anyway. And I know what your charge is, probably $500 to $1,000. So it's relatively small. And again, we're talking about small dollars. So in a sense, the town doesn't have the personnel time or the training. So from that point of view, it's a relatively small dollar amount. If Firemark feels that it's worth their while, then maybe it's pure revenue to us, so that I can see that as an option. Thanks.
Any other committee members with comments or questions? And just to reiterate something in the report too, we're looking at a 3-year contract here, and of course, when it comes up for renewal, in all likelihood, the matter will come back to this committee or to council, depending upon the format of governance as to how it will be dealt with at that time too. So we will have 3 years under our belt at that point in time to evaluate how we see it working out too. Any other questions? Failing that, then resolve that report, Finance 25-49, the Firemark Agency Agreement, August 28th, 2025, be received, and that the Finance Committee recommends Council direct staff to prepare the agency agreement and necessary bylaws for endorsement at the September 22nd, 2025 Council meeting. All those in favor, by show of hands, please. All those opposed? So noted, and the motion is carried. The next report on our agenda is Finance Report 25-50, the amendment to the Development Charges Bylaw of 2021-14. And that too was amended, so if I could have a mover and seconder to get the report on the floor. Councillor Vardy and Councillor Howe has seconded that. Mr. Delmonico.
Thank you once again. The purpose of this report is to remove the upcoming March 2026 expiration date from the town's development charge bylaw. This would allow us to defer completion of the required development charge background study until key planning documents have been completed. In order to meet the current bylaw expiration date and allow sufficient time for public notice and public meetings, work on the development charge background study would have to be completed by the end of this year. And we'd have to use out-of-date or as yet unapproved data. This would likely result in having to complete a follow-up background study shortly thereafter. Basing the DCs on incomplete data could also lead to a more and costly appeal process. A background study is a legislative requirement that must be done prior to the passing of a development charge bylaw. The background study melds together the future growth projections with capital needs to service that growth to arrive at development charge rates. And several key master planning documents that will serve as important inputs to the DC study are still underway and not finalized, including the official plan, which drives future growth assumptions, as well as things like the Transportation Master Plan and the Parks Master Plan, which will provide capital needs. These studies are expected to be complete for the end of this year and into next year. So we expect work on the DC background study can begin later this year and then continue into 2026 in line with those key planning documents so that the required background study and development charge bylaw can then be completed and approved thereafter. Thank you.
Questions or comments? I don't see any hands up, so we will move to voting. So the resolution is resolved that Report Finance 25-50, the amendment to the Development Charges Bylaw, number 2021-14, as amended, dated August 28th, 2025, be received, and that the Finance Committee recommends Council direct staff to amend the Development Charges Bylaw, number 2021-14, as amended, to remove the expiration date. By show of hands, please, all those in favor? And that is carried. On our agenda, item number 9 is correspondence, of which we have none this evening. And item number 10 is any other business. Is there any other business that a committee member wishes to raise at this time? Thank you. You've all been very patient, and it's we're hitting the 2-hour mark. If there is no other business, then we will move on to the date of the next meeting, which appears to be tentatively scheduled for Thursday, September 25th at 6 p.m. But if there are any changes, they will be communicated to all the committee members via email and on the town's calendar on our website in that particular order. And that means we can now officially adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.